really excited to be offering what we've been playing with and teaching. We call it 9 Skills for Navigating Conflict. We started developing this material a couple of years ago. What we've discovered is that the less we talk and the more you practice, the more you learn and the more you integrate. And so we've designed the class to be as interactive as possible and to get you guys practicing with each other and trying out these skills as much as possible. That's the goal as we dive into the class. What we'll be covering over these 8 weeks is what we call the 9 Skills for Navigating Conflict. We will actually do lots and lots of practices. You'll be getting handouts along the way. Over the course of the class, we will be practicing what Marshall identified as 3 modes for practicing MBC. And we start with this foundation of self-connection. So every class will be offering you different self-connection exercises and be able to utilize these in your own life as you see fit. And there are various different kinds of self-connection that touch on the various skills that we will be practicing. Self-connection is this, for me, it's like the foundation. I can't imagine how you could practice NBC without self-connection. So self-connection then gives us the opportunity to start practicing the other modes of NVC, one of which is empathy. That's the listening part of NVC, where we open not only our ears, but our heart to receive another human being. And then also the honesty part of NVC. That's where we actually express what's going on in our heart and in our life. And so now we'll do a little practice of self-connection. So for this, you won't need to be taking any notes or anything. It's just a chance for you to be with yourself and practice your own self-connection. You can do it with your eyes open or your eyes closed. I usually close my eyes. It just supports my own presence. And first begin with what we call the 0 step, which is getting clear on why are you doing this exercise? What's your intention for doing this exercise right now? And then to bring your attention to the present moment. Everything about NVC is designed to cultivate the sense of connection and presence. So first notice what you're perceiving with your 5 senses. You might be seeing things, hearing my voice and maybe other sounds in your environment. You may be aware of tastes in your mouth. You may be aware of aromas. You may be aware of a sense of touch. You can feel how gravity is holding you to your seat. And you can notice that you're breathing, that you have a body that's breathing for you. You might also notice that when there are these spaces, your mind might become active. You might think of things completely unrelated to the self-connection exercise. That's okay, just notice that too. That's just a certain part of your brain that automatically does that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's very human. But you can observe that as well. And just bring your attention back gently to the exercise, to notice what you're observing in this moment, especially tuning into sound. Notice what sounds you're aware of in your own environment. Noticing sound is effortless in my experience. I don't have to try to listen, just naturally listen. Is that so for you as well? I notice I can focus my attention on a particular sound, and then I can relax that attention and just notice what other sounds might be available. And then shifting focus to your body to notice any sensation that you're aware of in your body. You might be aware of a feeling of pain somewhere in your body or discomfort, pressure. You may be aware of warmth, coolness, stillness or movement, something else in your body, some sensation. Sometimes we have words that describe these sensations, and we call them emotions. So there may be an emotion that you're aware of in this moment. You might even have the experience of emotions shifting from moment to moment. Noticing that feelings are of the body. You may also notice thoughts. Thoughts are of the mind. Again, you can observe either and shift attention from one to the other. And right now, the offering is to notice what's going on in your body. What are you feeling in this moment? Feelings are pointers to meaning. What do these feelings mean to you? What's important to you right now? Feelings are guiding us to touching our needs or our values. So what are the feelings in your body right now telling you are important to you in this moment? You're here for a good reason. You're here because you're predicting that something about being on this call, being a part of this class, being a part of this community is going to contribute to your well-being or contribute to some other needs, maybe for learning or growth or whatever is important to you about being here. What is that? And as you sit in your needs, what's important to you in this moment, open yourself to the possibility that you have power. You have power to behave in ways, to make choices that can contribute to the needs that you're hoping to meet by being on this call, being a part of this community and this class. What could you ask of yourself or of someone else that could actually contribute to the needs that you're hoping to be met? So as we begin to transition out of the self-connection exercise, we're going to move into empathy and honesty with each other. We're going to invite you to be a part of a pair. While you're in your pair, you'll be a complete choice. You want to really acknowledge that you have choice about what you say and what you do in these pairs. You might choose to just be silent when it's your turn to speak. That's okay. Or you may just say one or two words, or you may talk the whole time that you have. So you guys have probably heard of speed dating. This is not speed dating, but it is little brief experiences where you'll be with 3 different people over the course of the next few minutes, answering some questions. Each exercise will be slightly different than the one before. In this first exercise, there'll be a speaker and a listener. The speaker, your job will be to answer the question that I'll give you in just a moment, to just speak as authentically as you like about what comes up for you as you consider the question that we would enjoy you answering. When it's your turn to be the listener, then we would invite you to do it with a zip lip, to just provide presence for the other person, to not respond with any words, but you might grunt and groan and and I get it. You might just have some sort of sounds that come out and can nod your head. You're a human being and you're going to naturally be doing these connection behaviors, so that's perfectly fine. After about 2 minutes, then switch. So then the other person will answer the question from your own authentic place and the other person will listen. We'll do that for 2 minutes. Okay? The first question is, when I think about conflict, I feel. When I think about conflict, I feel. We'll see you all in 4 minutes and give you the next instruction.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We've brought you back to give you the next question and the next pairing. The next question is, what's the worst thing about conflict? The worst thing about conflict is, and again, you'll have 2 minutes each.
This exercise, we will add one other component. So when you're the listener, when the 2 minutes is up, the invitation is for you to reflect one thing that you heard was important to the speaker, and then switch. So that's the addition this time, is listeners will reflect. So this time there's 2 minutes of speaking, 30 seconds of reflection, and then the switch.
Okay, so just notice how you are in this moment, having had that experience. There's one more time we're going to go into a new pairing, and this one's going to be for about 5 minutes because it's going to be a mindful conversation where it's a back and forth, which you might enjoy having at this point. And so the question to be focused on this time is, what's the best thing about conflict? The best thing about conflict is, consider that and have a mindful dialogue with somebody new.
What we mean by a mindful dialogue is you get to use all these skills that you've already been using, the listening with deep presence, the speaking with authenticity, maybe some reflection, maybe there's some requests that you have. And now it's much more of the flow rather than breaking it up artificially like we did with the first two exercises. The idea is you hold that zero step, you hold that intention to connect, you hold that sense of presence in the dialogue. That's what we mean by mindful dialogue.
We're all back now. Just to consider in this moment, what needs were satisfied for you by the exercise? If you're willing to share your needs, any needs that were met by that.
It's been the first opportunity to really start to feel connected to someone else, even though I've been around other people, just not sure why my head is where it is. So it was a nice opportunity for connection.
Thank you. Any other needs that you just want to popcorn out here?
Brought me a sense of safety and community, so I'm more present and able to share.
A synergy and a collaboration, meeting of hearts and minds.
Learning.
Anything else?
Sharing and bringing to light some, and bringing not a conclusion, but bringing to light something that happened just very recently and learning together.
It brought me some ease around the word conflict.
I see in the chat that at least for one person, there was a need, perhaps longing to be met. The chat is really a question about the difficulty of identifying feelings. And says, obviously I'm feeling, but when someone asks me, I sort of freeze and feel numb. And it's a question, but what comes up for me about that is, that's the feeling. That's actually the feeling, a sense of numbness or freeze. To just notice that and be in that.
Any other needs met that anyone wants to highlight before we go to the next question? I had a need met, a need for support from Leonie. I had a need met for cooperation, that you all did the exercise. I had a need met for connection with our friend who is on the call with us all the way from Yantai, China. I actually feel touched as I savor all those needs met. So thank you all.
So then the next question is, what did you notice, see, or hear that contributed to self-connection or connection during that practice? What did you observe that contributed to self-connection or connection?
Yeah, in other words, during the exercise, what did you notice that either you did or that other people that you were working with did that contributed to either self-connection or connection?
One of the people I was speaking with listened deeply and reflected back what I said and actually gave me an insight about it, which made me feel that we were connected and that he really heard me.
Thank you.
Hearing some of the same feelings and needs when someone was sharing and having that same shared reality.
What else supported that connection for you in that practice?
For me, it was the feeling of safety and trust, the feeling that I was being safe to just speak up and then connect, and also feeling of companionship.
Yeah, and I wonder if you can identify anything that supported that. Great.
I felt safe to share.
So, in other words, just that self-connection, knowing that you had feelings in your body, letting you know that you were safe, supported you being able to connect.
Having an opportunity to be able to speak about my heart. Just the opportunity about it, it was making me feeling warm.
Yeah, and I heard you say that there was a sense of space there that really supported that. Thank you. Anyone else?
For me, it was really helpful just to stop and think about it, just to think about the question and then to check in with what I was feeling about it. The question of conflict in and of itself without an actual conflict staring me in the face.
We ask this question because it really helps us to become more aware of what's supporting our sense of self-connection. What's supporting our sense of connection with another person gives us more choice to do things that support this and also to make requests about that. So that's why we're taking some time to highlight this. Anything else you observed that was helpful?
Being given the space and time by another, just them being present and listening to you. Thank you for making it a little more clear why we're doing this, because then I started to think, what did I enjoy? And making a request for just presence could be powerful.
Yeah, I love that you are all on this call and we're part of a community, and that's the world I want to live in. So let's figure out how to do it. I'm going to make a guess that at least for some people, you heard something like, do you want to speak first? And got some sort of invitation. Did that happen for anybody? Yeah. So that's one of the skills, actually, that we will be looking at as we go through the 9 skills. And another skill that I heard people mention was that there was honesty expressed. You expressed what was alive in you and other people, and you also got to hear that, and I imagine you listened with empathy. Another really powerful skill that supports this connection and self-connection. And I've also heard gratitude, another skill. We'll even look a little bit closer at this particular skill as we move through today, how powerful that skill is and how valuable. So, anything else anyone wants to highlight? Did you want to say something?
Back on the needs met, the need to contribute was something that was sort of an edge for me. I would always feel shy in my life, and so I never contributed much and didn't get that need met. And it's really joyful to be on the last exercise we did. I wasn't afraid to say something. I hoped it would be a contribution, but I really felt like, hey, and somebody acknowledged it. And I said, that's cool. That need was met there to be able to contribute.
We've had a lot of technical challenges these first exercises. So that in and of itself, I think I'm trying to look into myself. What do I feel about that? I guess I feel a little bit of loss that it doesn't feel complete, but I did enjoy and appreciate the amount of time we had. So I'm kind of sitting here waiting for more things so I can feel more connected. I think that's where I'd like to go.
Thank you. Anything else anybody would like to share about connection and self-connection from this exercise? I imagine that there was also another skill, and it's a skill we call the 0 step. There's a little story about the 0 step. This is one of the key skills that we look at and that we include. It's actually a central skill that we include in the 9 skills. And Jim and I had the great fortune of having a practice group an open practice group that we were able to go to right after we met Marshall. The way this practice group ran, it was what we called a leaderful practice group. And so different people would do a little lesson, like a 10 or 15 minute lesson. And then we'd have breakouts and do all kinds of things that we brought or wanted to learn. And that particular first time that we went to that practice group, there was a man named Mel Schneider, and he did a little presentation on what he called zero. You know, in MVC, we have these 4 components. Often they're numbered even. So, you know, we can create this structure that, you know, there's observation. And that's the first skill. Then the second skill is feeling. And the third skill is need. And the fourth skill is requesting. And when they're numbered like that, actually, it looks like there's some sort of form to it. But they're just skills. And he pointed out that there was a 0 in there as well, of what happens before we focus even on observations, feelings, needs, and requests. Particularly if we're going to open up our mouth. We might use these to even get to the 0 step, but to actually be aware that there is a place inside of ourselves that enables us to even be in an MVC process. So what he pointed to was this 0 step of self-awareness, and to notice whether our intention is actually connection. So the intention to create a quality of a connection that inspires compassionate giving and receiving. So that's a key part of the 0 step. And then another key part is attention. Where do we put our attention? And that's in the present moment. Because that is actually the only place we can connect. We can mourn a lack of connection in the past, but really putting our attention right here is where we actually are connected. We can hope for connection in the future, but really being present in the moment is where that will happen. And then the effect of that is the 0 step, which includes openness to outcome. We move beyond the agendas that we create or the attachment we have to any particular thing happening, or even the attachment to a need that we think should be met. And so the effect of the 0 step, and a key piece of that, is openness to outcome. Jim, would you like to add anything about this part?
Well, the question that usually comes up at this point is, well, what happens if I'm not in 0? What do I do? Because that all sounds really good, except for when I'm triggered. And so that's where this other very important skill that we'll be covering in great detail over the next few weeks, the skill of self-empathy. We've already been practicing it a few times during this class today with the self-connection exercise. And when we keep inviting you to notice how you're feeling in the moment and in response to the question about numbness and so forth, this is like a key way to get back to 0 once we notice that we're triggered. And we will offer many different exercises over the next few weeks that will give you tools to put in your toolbox, so to speak, to practice self-empathy in lots of different ways.
This is a key avenue back to 0 when we're not there. So we'll have little bits there, and because 0 will also be a place we want to keep coming back to, because we want to take our whole self with us.
The remarkable thing for me that I've learned as we started kind of teaching NBC in this particular format over the last couple of years is we're doing the best we can, Jori and me. When we're teaching NVC, we're doing the best to teach our own experience, not something that we read in a book. So if you look at Marshall's book, Language of Life, or any of them, you'll never see the phrase a zero step. Marshall never used that phrase, but it hit us so deeply at that very first practice group. It was the way of encapsulating what Marshall does write about in his book. He does write about the intention to connect in the service of compassion and giving. He does write about attention in the present moment. He also writes about the effect of having this attention to be open to what happens next in life, to be totally present to what happens. And what we've learned, at least I can speak for myself, and I think it's true for Jori as well, that I'm in zero most of the time. I didn't realize that. I thought that I was actually upset most of the time. But through my practice of NVC, I realized how much of the time I actually just want to connect, either with myself, or I want to connect with Jori, or I want to connect with you. My attention actually is in the present moment. Even when my mind is wandering, I'm present to my mind wandering. Even if I'm caught up about in some strong separating emotion of fear or anger or whatever, I'm present to that. And so just to acknowledge that for all of us, this is our natural state. That's one of the things that I took away from the very second training that we took with Marshall, is Jori and I are the eager students. And of course, so we got there early. And this is about 3 months after the first training. And we're sitting on the very front row to absorb every possible tidbit we can get from Marshall. And he opens the training with, the kind of normal greetings and so forth. And he says, I'm about to disappoint a lot of you. So this gets my attention. One of the things I loved about Marshall was he always had a way of being able to really awaken attention. And he says, I'm about to disappoint a lot of you because you're probably here thinking that I can teach you how to practice NVC. He says, but I can't teach you that. And so by now I'm freaking out a little bit because I just paid $200 for Marshall to teach me NVC. Now he's telling me that he's not going to do it. I need to know what's going on. So somehow I broke through my shyness and I raised my hand and I said, Marshall, what do you mean you can't teach me NVC? I just paid you $200 to teach me NVC. And Marshall had this way of being able to have independent activity with his eyebrows. He did this thing where he could raise one eyebrow, which meant that that's exactly what he wanted, was for somebody to question why he couldn't teach NVC. So he's letting me know that he's giving me a thank you. He says, I'm glad you asked. He says, the reason that I can't teach you NVC is because how could I teach you what you are? How could I teach you what your basic nature is as a human being? How could I teach you that deeper than anything else in your experience is this desire to connect in the present moment? I don't even have any words to say beyond that, other than to maybe move on to the last skill that we'll highlight, and that's the power of requests. So requests are the glue of connection. If we start with this intention to connect, we maintain and sustain connection through the power of our requests. And if these words don't mean anything to you now, that's absolutely fine. We'll be going through a lot of detail about how to make these requests and what they sound like, help you figure out how to use these requests in your own natural language as we go. So we pause here and see if there's any questions about what we've said so far. So what's up for you now? Any questions?
Where I am right now is filled with curiosity, because when you mentioned the zero step and had the question up there, what could it be? I thought that the zero step might be actually empathy or self-empathy. So I'm excited and curious to see that even more clearly and the distinction between those.
Thank you for saying that. Zero is actually a state of being. It's what those things are serving us, serving in us, to really be standing tall in our giraffe, to really have that sense of that awareness when we tipped out of that consciousness. So we'll be using that a lot during the next weeks as well, and doing even physical movement things to anchor that awareness, because that's what I notice in myself is I screw up when I just don't even realize I've lost my center. I've lost my whole being. My whole brain is in a different mode. My neurobiology is shutting me down and I'm just reacting. That's the 0, and it's powerful. So we'll be doing that during the entire practices. That'll be a key. Thank you for bringing that up.
Any other questions or comments about what we've covered so far?
I just want to make sure I understood what you were saying. I just thought that connection to the present moment is not necessarily meaning that you are connected with all of your senses and you are in a rosy, peaceful place. It just means that you're connected to the present moment, even if you are unclear or just not really connected with your senses, or you are living, really in the past memories that brought up upset for you.
Yeah, there's 2 ways that we deal with the past. We may be very present to our thinking about it. That's much more aligned with what we would call 0. And when we get lost in the past, or we get hooked in our demands, that's when we have lost that central place. Does that clarify it for you?
I just wanted to make sure you're just saying that to be connected with the present moment, no matter which state of mind you are at, just being present to that.
Yes, and open to outcome, and with an intention to connect. Those are very important elements there. So we're in the present moment. We notice what's happening. There may be feelings going through our body that indicate that needs are not met, yet we are clear that the path is connection, both connection to ourselves and connection with others. And when we don't have that sense, when we see the other person as a saber-toothed tiger, or we think this is what has to happen, we have lost the big picture. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for asking.
I'm very interested in the 0 step, and I want to make sure I understand what's been said. So 2 things that I've written down are that it's important to have openness to outcome, which you just talked about, and to not be attached to a need.
I'm going to stop you there right before you even go on, because to be committed to your need, but not attached to the strategy of how you're going to get it met.
Okay, let me talk about openness to outcome then.
Yes.
My understanding is that if I'm open to outcome, I'm kind of in the center. That is, I'm not telling myself stories. I'm not contracted in myself. I kind of have a spaciousness about me. And if I'm in that place, I'm not so clear about why I would need self-empathy, because I'm already in this sort of relaxed, open space where if I don't have an attachment to outcome, whatever is happening is where I am and where the other person is, and I'm going there. So I'm trying to see the connection there.
I'm in harmony with what you said. You're already there. The self-empathy is a strategy to get back there.
Okay.
It's how we take care of ourselves, how we let our nervous system actually come back into what we call in Hawaiian pono, which is balance. Yeah.
You remind me of one of my greatest NBC teachers for the last year or so has been, we have 2 cats named Dusty and Deep. And they're older cats, they're 15 years old, and they are masters of presence and being alert. And so when I think about, sometimes I'll just sit and I'll watch their brother and sister. And Deep has a personality that I would call somewhat reactive. She often goes into what appears to me to be hijacked by her emotions. She just kind of freaks out. But she seems to notice that she's freaked out. She'll take some action to protect herself, like in other words, get away from Jim because Jim's about to try to put medicine on her ear or something like that. She'll move away, then she sits, and then she begins to give herself empathy by licking her paws or doing whatever her own self-soothing behaviors are until she comes back to Pono or back to presence. Then she looks at me and she gives me a meow. She's not holding an enemy image of me or anything like that. She might be cautious, but she's alert. And so both of these cats have been great teachers in practicing zero. They're naturally in zero. Since they can't, as far as we know, they can't have the ability to make an enemy image. They can't have a moral judgment. They are just naturally present. And so I love having teachers like that in my life. Other great teachers can be dogs, who actually have, most dogs have this completely open, unconditional experience of whatever outcome happens is okay, whatever, And then kids, especially the younger the kid, the closer to NVC consciousness they are, because they haven't been conditioned out of it yet. So a brand new baby is the best NVC teacher. So if you can hang out with babies and watch what they do, they are constantly demonstrating the zero step in everything that they do. They're totally present, and they just want to connect. And they're open to outcome. They don't have any prejudgment about what's supposed to happen next.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments before we move into the next practice?
I try to practice this step zero, and it's something that it's part of where I took this class is that I'm really struggling with. Like, I'll have empathy for myself, but I'm noticing that I'm reactive to the conflict, and I struggle to be able to do NVC in those moments. As much as I have awareness about it and I try and reflect about it, and even maybe talk to someone else about it, of like, hey, I'm having this conflict and I'm reactive, and can you help me get out of it? I'm wondering if you guys can talk about some tools for how to, when you are struggling with step zero and you recognize that you're emotionally reactive, how to still be able to move through the NVC process if you're stuck there.
I was just going to highlight that you're already halfway home. By noticing that you are reactive, you're already taking a huge step towards reclaiming the zero step. Noticing our reactivity is always the gateway back to presence.
And then the second piece that is, in terms of just being aware, is to give yourself permission to be having whatever experience you're having. That's the next gateway, once you can notice it. But it's the noticing that is the hardest part. And then the third part of it is what we're going to move into after this, is to have a practice and a capacity to touch into some gratitude, any gratitude at all. And my back pocket gratitude sometimes is just gravity's working, but anything to begin to open up the vision to the full picture of what's happening. Because what's happening is your nervous system is totally hijacked, and even your vision is narrowed. So that's just a beginning of looking at what we can do to come back into our bodies fully and into this present moment fully, with some sense of openness to life again. That's what we call the Jiffy Lube process.
And I put the 3 steps, and we will cover these more in detail next week. Next week, we'll be focusing on the answer to your question. But the first step, again, is just to notice that you're not at zero, to notice that either you're lost in thought about the past or the future, you're feeling an uncomfortable feeling, and it's hooked to a thought of resistance, of not being open to you just notice that as the first step. Then give yourself permission to feel what you feel and need what you need. In other words, you turn yourself into a human being. You notice that all human beings go through what you're going through. You're not unique. You are unique, but you're not unique in this. You're not unique in your suffering. That all human beings get upset. All human beings lose capacity to live from zero. So that's actually, I hate the word normal, but it's normal. It's just the way we are. And then the third way to get back is gratitude. And that will be what we finish up with today after we answer the last questions.
And I just add that piece about the normality of it. Just to be clear, we're hardwired for really good reasons. We've evolved this nervous system for protection. But sometimes we don't realize, we lose sight of the fact that the person there is not the saber-toothed tiger, or whatever's happened is not the end of the world or catastrophic, but our nervous system doesn't know that, so we're reacting.
So what if that answers your question for now?
Thank you. And then we have 2 more questions.
Having spent a lot of time with spiritual masters, living in spiritual communities, a common teaching, and maybe this is from the Bhagavad Gita, but this idea that the present moment is inevitable, meaning like if you know that this moment, that every moment that's happening to you is inevitable, then there's like a natural acceptance of what happens or what is to come. So similar to what you outlined in the 0 step, which I was surprised that it was sort of the 0 step, because it's sort of a very high spiritual state to be in that frame of mind, and in fact, I feel like if I could be in that state, then I wouldn't even need NBC. It would just happen naturally or something. But one of the reasons that I was interested in this course, and I don't really have a background in NBC, is that I tend to speak from here. Like I'm completely disconnected from what's happening in the gut or the heart. And I speak from the mind. We're definitely not present with what's happening.
I actually love your comment. I love the insight that you're pointing to. At one level, this is the highest of all human aspirations, this thing that we call 0. And on the other hand, it's the most natural of all states. And so this course is actually designed to look at what gets in the way. What is it about the way we've been educated or conditioned or whatever? And how can NVC help us to untangle the knots that we have put into our experience so that we can actually claim our birthright to the higher consciousness planes of unconditional love and oneness. And so that's what we're hoping to do in this class. So please hold us to that high standard.
Thank you. Do you have a question?
I understand we're talking about not treating others as saber-toothed tigers, as opponents or as threats, but sometimes you are in a circumstance in which the person you're communicating with is really hostile, and maybe they have legitimate reasons for being hostile, maybe they don't, maybe you won't find out because you're not in a position to have that kind of conversation with them. Sometimes you really aren't sure that they're not trying to get you. Do you still approach them with as though they have the best intentions, regardless of anything that might indicate otherwise?
Thank you for your question. This is the beauty of the 9 skills that we've identified, because they're all needs-based. And so whether you approach them or not is based on the needs that are alive in the moment. There's no do this and then this, following patterns. There are certain patterns that we point out with the 9 skills that really support connection, but there is no compelling, you should do this. I have some people in my life that I bless, and I choose to lower my involvement. That's not the choice that I want to have in my life. And yet, if it is my husband or my children or someone I'm closely related to in my work, then different needs arise in me, and I'm likely to move forward with that connection. So this is moving beyond the shoulds, and if there's a sense of lack of safety, or you see needs not met by doing that, tune into the needs that you're wanting to meet and take the step from there. And that's where that self-empathy is. And that's also an element of the 0 step. There's choice here.
That answers the question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
For this part, it'd be great if you have something to write on and with, so a piece of paper, or if you want to write on your computer, that's fine, because it's a written practice. And then there'll be a chance for you to share about it with a partner again at the end. So this is a gratitude practice, and the easy way to practice NBC. We use all the same skills, the same 9 skills, but we do it to celebrate our resourcefulness, the fact that much of the time our needs are met and that we are swimming in a sea of needs that have been satisfied. And so the first step is to consider something that somebody did that made your life more wonderful. So write down a specific thing that someone did that made your life more wonderful. And so I'll give an example. While we were traveling, our friend who attends our practice group, she took responsibility for sending out our weekly emails to inform our community about what was going on each week. So Aubrey took over the email list. So now you take a moment and write down something that someone did that made life more wonderful for you. Then the second step is to write down what need that person's action contributed to. Why is that valuable? Why did you choose it? What's important to you about that? And in my case, it really contributed to a sense of support, and it also contributed to continuity for our community. So support and community. What is it about for you? Then the third thing to write down is now this is a chance to practice that self-connection, to actually notice right now how you feel having written that gratitude. Right now, when I remember Aubrey doing that for me and contributing to continuity and support, I feel warm and I feel a sense of happiness and appreciation. And I notice a warmth in my chest, an openness, and a smile on my face. So notice what you notice and describe your feelings to yourself in your written form. This is where the power of this practice comes from, is actually to savor the feelings in your body that naturally arise when you notice that needs have been satisfied. Savoring means to extend the pleasure of something. And pleasure is the body's natural response when needs are satisfied. So you're actually building resources in your own emotional experience by savoring these feelings. So take your time with this part of the practice. And the final part of the practice is to write down what you did that helped to make the action possible. In this case, before we left on our trip, I asked Aubrey if she would be willing to take on this task for us. So it was my request that helped make this action possible. What did you do? The suggestion is that you do this for the next week, that you do it not just once, not just twice, but do it 3 times to run through 3 different gratitudes. 3 is a magic number. And it's funny, Marshall suggested 3 many, many years ago before we learned about a study that was done at the University of Pennsylvania by a man named Martin Seligman, who is considered the father of positive psychology. And Martin did a study at UPenn, and he actually used this exact process, maybe not quite with the clarity NBC provides, but nevertheless, he had people think of something that they were grateful for and what they did that made it possible. And he took the 60 really depressed people, self-identified depressed people that were willing to take a test and measure their level of depression. And then he gave them this as their intervention for 30 days. They were to write down 3 gratitudes a day. And then at the end of the 30 days, he invited them once again to take the depression scale. And what he found out when he collated the data was that of the 60 people who participated in this small study, 57 out of the 60 raised their depression score. In other words, they were less depressed after 30 days than they were 30 days ago, simply by writing down these sentences. No drugs involved. That's a response rate, a positive response rate of 92.5%. If you take antidepressant drugs, which might actually help a lot of people, but it only helps about 1/3 or less of the people who take them. And so this is 3 times more powerful than drugs. So it's the natural drug. It actually is the thing that nature has designed for us to become more present, to increase our access to the 0 step, and to build the resources that we need in order to move towards more life. So any reactions or responses to this exercise? I'd love to hear from a few people.
I'm guessing that it's effective because it makes you feel empowered.
That's a really important part of it. I think that it shows that we have the capacity to contribute to our own well-being as well as the well-being of others. And it also points to our interdependence. One of my favorite quotes of Marshall is, "Independence is an illusion." That what's underlying our experience of humanity is our interdependence. And this exercise points to both of those things.
It also opens up our vision to a wholeness rather than the limitation that comes about when our negativity bias happens and we lose sight of the big picture of life.
Any other reactions or responses to this exercise?
This exercise helps me to just make a shift from the place of, unhappiness, like my needs are not being met, to the place of, oh, that's how it feels when my needs are met. I forget about that. I forget about what's not there and what's missing and what needs are not met. It is very helpful to me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly right. I like the word clear-eyed. It really points to this ability that we human beings have to be clear-eyed or to make clear observations. And it undoes what Jori mentioned a moment ago, the negativity bias, and we'll talk more about that next week. This idea that we don't always see the world as it is. We see the world through a bias, that we're in trouble all the time, or that things are not going well. So it's a way of actually becoming clear that more often than we often give ourselves credit for, our needs are being met. So thank you. Anything else? Not seeing or hearing anything else, then we'll move into a checkout after this encouragement. Please, for the next week, try it for 1 week, and hopefully you'll do it for the whole 8 weeks that we're doing it. But you'll get more out of this class if you actually make the commitment now. We were in China, we were presenting this process to people, and then for some reason, I'd never done this before, but I asked people, and I said, if you're willing to join me in this practice for the next 30 days, would you be willing to stand up? Every single person in that room stood up. And there was such a sense of mutual empowerment. And now this group, and there's about 150 people who are doing this online with each other every day, sharing their 3 gratitudes and celebrating them with each other. And so it's an amazing social experiment. And I had the thought, I wonder what happens when we get 1 million people doing this. And then we get 10 million people doing this. What happens on our planet when we all begin to start swimming in the sea of gratitude? So please join me in the next 30 days and try this out. I'm on today is day 75 for me of doing the practice. So I do it first thing in the morning before I read the news. And that gives me the resilience to then be able to read the news and to stay present for that.
I also really enjoy what you've said about how, because you're doing it in the morning, as you go to sleep, you're thinking about what your next task is, and you're going to sleep thinking about your gratitudes.
Yeah, exactly. So let's take 5 minutes to debrief with each other this exercise and to say to one another, to have another mindful conversation for 5 minutes about this exercise and anything else that they want to be heard about the experience of the class today. So another mindful conversation, then we'll do a checkout in 5 minutes with the whole group.
There's a clarifying question in the chat.
The request is to do this 3 times per day for the next week, 3 times per day. I find that it takes 5 minutes to do it, but I'm getting pretty good at it. I know this pattern really well. It might take 10 minutes the first few times.
All right, I'm going to open up all of the rooms now.
Here we are, back together again. And so we have time to hear briefly from as many people who are willing to share. What are you taking away from this session that you've done? What are you taking away that you can use or focus on and learn from over the next week until we meet again?
Yeah, a lot of takeaways. A couple of them, taking the initiative, something I can do more of. A lot of voices are telling me not to. Why not? Embarrassment and all that. But just when I do that, it's very fruitful, it seems, upon reflection. I have a renewed commitment to this gratitude practice. I notice the resistance I have to it every time, and then when I do it, it's just, and I enter into a different dimension of warmth and needs met. Yeah, that I really want to make this a practice. So I might do that, my partnered with, we might do that with each other to support the discipline getting started.
Beautiful. What time of the day?
Maybe first thing in the morning, like when I get up, and before I go to bed. Those would be 2 good times to do it.
Thank you. I invite everybody to consider, if you're going to do this, what time of the day, to just really make that commitment with yourself. It's a great thing to do if you're a parent with your kids.
So thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. What else are you highlighting for yourself that you want to take away from this?
So I'm taking away something from the first dyad that I was part of, which is seeing conflict as an opportunity rather than as a scary situation that I need to get myself out of. An opportunity to understand my needs, someone else's needs, and see if we can get them met. And that's a real reframing for me, and it's exactly the kind of thing I was hoping to get from this program.
Thank you.
What I take away is more emphasis on the 0 step. And if I'm trying to do empathy and I notice I'm not completely grounded, so now I have more motivation, awareness to go back to 0 and get grounded again. So thank you.
Thank you.
One of my takeaways is having more patience for the difficulties at getting to step 0, and to maybe even when I'm in the difficulties of it, to just acknowledge that as a part of the process of NVC, of like letting myself just like before I try and go through the other steps to stop and say, hey, I'm feeling, this because of the situation, and be able to just kind of have that be a part of it and to not feel so much judgment about it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jori and Jim.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.